Johnny Carson left behind a fortune that makes his family cry. For 30 years, he was the last face millions of Americans saw before falling asleep. The king of late-night television, the man whose approval could make or break a comedian's career with just a nod or a laugh. Johnny Carson, with his impeccable timing, Midwestern charm, and that trademark golf swing, didn't just host The Tonight Show. He defined it. When Carson finally bid farewell to his viewers on May 22, 1992, an era ended. After 4,531 episodes and nearly 25,000 guests, the most powerful man in television walked away at the height of his influence, retreating into a notoriously private retirement that only enhanced his legendary status. For the next 13 years until his death in 2005, Carson all but disappeared from public view, a sphinx-like figure whose silence only magnified his mystique. But what happened to the immense fortune he accumulated during those decades of television dominance? The man who once joked, "I was so naive as a kid I used to sneak behind the barn and do nothing," proved anything but naive when it came to managing his empire. When Johnny Carson passed away at 79, he left behind a financial legacy that shocked Hollywood and forever transformed the lives of those closest to him. This isn't just a story about money, though the numbers will astonish you. It's about a complex man whose final decisions revealed more about his true character than perhaps anything he ever said on air. Today we'll explore the surprising journey of Johnny Carson's fortune, where it came from, where it went, and why it caused such powerful emotions among his family. Because sometimes, what we leave behind says more about us than what we do in life. And in Carson's case, his ultimate legacy came not from the television empire he built, but from what he chose to do with the fruits of that empire when the cameras stopped rolling for good. The boy from Nebraska, humble beginnings, long before Here's Johnny became America's nightly greeting, John William Carson was just another Midwestern boy with dreams bigger than his circumstances. Born on October 23, 1925, in Corning, Iowa, and raised primarily in Norfolk, Nebraska, Carson's early years gave no obvious indication of the extraordinary path that lay ahead. Johnny grew up in the heart of the Depression, explained a childhood friend who knew the Carson family. His father, Homer, worked for the power company, steady work during tough times, but they were far from wealthy. His mother, Ruth, was the real character in the family, quite a forceful personality. Johnny inherited her wit, though he was much more reserved by nature. This complex relationship with his mother would later become fodder for Carson's occasional self-deprecating jokes about his upbringing. "My mother never quite believed I was good enough," he once quipped on air. Friends suggest there was more truth than comedy in these references. What set young Johnny apart was an unusual fascination with magic, a passion sparked when he ordered a magic kit at age 12 after seeing a performance by magician Harry Blackstone Sr. This early interest would prove pivotal, not just for the technical skills it developed, but for how it shaped Carson's understanding of timing, misdirection, and audience psychology. Johnny Carson, the Great Carsoni, began performing magic shows at local Rotary clubs and county fairs, earning $3 per performance, his first taste of entertainment income. This teenage magician could never have imagined that decades later, his annual salary would reach 8 figures. After high school, Carson's path took a detour through the U.S. Navy, where he served as an ensign during World War II. Though he never saw combat, Carson's military experience broadened his horizons beyond Nebraska and provided material for later comedic anecdotes about his time decoding encrypted messages aboard the USS Pennsylvania. Following his discharge, Carson's ambitions led him to the University of Nebraska, where he studied radio and speech with an eye toward broadcasting, a field expanding rapidly in post-war America. It was here that Carson made his first true foray into performing, appearing on university radio station KFAB. He wasn't the most obvious star in the making, recalled a university contemporary. Johnny was smart, certainly, and quietly ambitious, but he was also reserved, even a bit shy off stage. Nothing like the confident host America would later know. That transformation was remarkable. Carson's early professional years included stints at WOW Radio in Omaha, and later WOW TV, where he hosted a show called The Squirrel's Nest, a humble beginning for television's future king. But even these early roles showcased his distinctive ability to remain cool under pressure and find humor in unexpected moments, hallmarks that would define his later success. In 1951, Carson made a pivotal move to Los Angeles, a decision that would ultimately set him on the path to extraordinary wealth. Working as a staff announcer at KNXT, he developed his own comedy show, Carson's Cellar, which caught the attention of influential industry figures, including comedian Red Skelton. Legend has it that when Skelton once knocked himself unconscious an hour before his live television show, Carson was called in as an emergency replacement, a twist of fate that showcased his ability to think on his feet before a national audience. These early Hollywood years also included hosting the game show Earn Your Vacation and a stint on The Johnny Carson Show, which, despite its short run, positioned him for bigger opportunities. By 1957, Carson had secured the hosting position on the game show Who Do You Trust?, a role that not only honed his interviewing skills, but also introduced him to Ed McMahon, the man who would become his straight man and sidekick for 3 decades on The Tonight Show. Johnny was methodical in those early years, noted a television historian. He was studying what worked and what didn't, building a repertoire of techniques and approaches. He wasn't an overnight success by any means. He was laying groundwork, developing the skills that would later make him seem effortless on camera. This careful preparation would serve Carson well when, in March 1962, NBC made the decision that would transform both his life and American television history, selecting him to replace Jack Paar as host of The Tonight Show. At 36 years old, Carson was about to step into the role that would eventually make him one of the wealthiest entertainers in the world. The making of a fortune, more than just a host. Johnny Carson didn't just host The Tonight Show, he owned a piece of it. In an era when television performers typically worked as hired talent, Carson revolutionized the business model through shrewd negotiation and perfect timing. Johnny understood his worth in a way few television personalities of that era did, explained a former NBC executive who worked closely with Carson during the height of his reign. By the mid-1970s, he wasn't just asking for salary increases, he was demanding ownership stakes, licensing rights, and unprecedented control. The numbers tell the story of Carson's extraordinary business acumen. When he began hosting The Tonight Show in 1962, his salary was a modest $100,000 per year, equivalent to about $900,000 today. By the time he retired 30 years later, Carson was earning an estimated $25 million annually, the highest-paid television entertainer in history at that time. But the true genius of Carson's financial empire came from his understanding of leverage. In 1980, The Tonight Show was expanded from 90 minutes to a full 2 hours. Carson agreed to the change on one condition, that NBC return the extra 30 minutes to local affiliates for their own programming. Why would he voluntarily reduce his airtime? Because Carson Productions, his independent company, would produce many of the shows filling those time slots, creating a secondary revenue stream completely separate from his NBC contract. It was brilliant, noted a television historian who has studied Carson's business deals. He essentially created prime real estate in the broadcast schedule, then built on that land. Few entertainers have ever demonstrated that level of strategic thinking. What many viewers never realized was that Carson's role extended far beyond his on-air presence. By the late 1970s, he had negotiated ownership of all of his previous Tonight Show episodes, an asset that would later prove immensely valuable in the age of home video and cable reruns. Additionally, he secured approval rights for any guest hosts during his increasingly frequent vacations, an unusual degree of control that reflected his indispensable status at NBC. Johnny's contract negotiations were legendary in the industry, revealed a network executive from that era. Every few years, the same dance would play out. Johnny would hint he might retire or go to another network. NBC executives would panic at the prospect of losing their most valuable star, and Carson would emerge with an even more favorable deal. These negotiations reached their apex in 1980, when Carson maneuvered for an unprecedented package that reduced his work schedule to 3 nights a week for 37 weeks a year, down from the original 5 nights, 46 weeks, while simultaneously increasing his compensation. This arrangement, roughly 111 shows annually versus the original 230, effectively doubled his per-show rate while giving him more time to pursue other interests and investments. Carson's wealth was further enhanced by perfect historical timing. His peak earning years coincided with an explosion in television advertising rates before cable fragmentation eroded network dominance. The simple mathematics of his situation were staggering, as the undisputed king of late-night television reaching millions of Americans every weeknight. Carson's per-minute value to advertisers made him an unparalleled asset. The Carson economy extended far beyond his own earnings, explained a media analyst. Entire careers were made by a single successful appearance on his show. Publishing houses would print extra copies of books in anticipation of the Carson bump if an author was scheduled as a guest. Vegas casinos would offer significantly higher fees to comedians who had been approved by Carson. He was a one-man industry. Carson Productions, founded in 1980, served as the vehicle for his expanding business empire. Beyond The Tonight Show, the company produced other television properties, including TV's Bloopers and Practical Jokes with Dick Clark. While never becoming a major studio, the production company created another revenue stream that diversified Carson's income beyond his NBC salary. Lesser known was Carson's savvy investing in real estate, particularly in Southern California during one of the region's most dramatic appreciation periods. His Malibu beach house, purchased for approximately $9.5 million in the early 1980s, included a championship tennis court, pavilion, and private access to the beach. Additional properties in Beverly Hills and other prime locations formed a substantial real estate portfolio. Johnny lived well, but compared to today's celebrity lifestyle, he was almost modest, revealed a longtime friend of the entertainer. He had the Malibu home, the New York apartment, some investments in real estate and art, but he wasn't flashy about his wealth. That wasn't his style. By the time he retired, financial analysts estimated Carson's net worth between $300 to $450 million in early 1990s dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that's approximately $600 to $900 million in today's terms, nearly $1 billion fortune accumulated primarily from television work, a feat that remains unmatched in broadcasting history. This relative financial conservatism, combined with savvy investment strategies guided by longtime financial advisors, meant that Carson's fortune didn't dissipate in retirement. Instead, it continued growing even after his final bow on The Tonight Show. But the question that fascinated Hollywood insiders remained. What would happen to this enormous wealth when television's most private superstar finally exited the stage for good? The answer would prove as surprising as Carson himself. The man behind the desk, Carson's complex personal life. To understand Johnny Carson's ultimate decisions about his fortune, one must first understand the complex, often contradictory man behind the familiar television persona. Despite spending 30 years in America's living rooms, Carson remained an enigma, warm and engaging on camera, but intensely private and often remote in his personal relationships. Johnny was like two different people, explained a longtime Tonight Show staff member who worked closely with Carson for over a decade. The Johnny you saw on television, charming, quick-witted, seemingly completely at ease, that was real, but it was just one facet. Off camera, he could be withdrawn, sometimes difficult, often lonely. Fame isolated him in ways that were difficult for anyone around him to fully comprehend. Carson's personal life was marked by contradictions and challenges that stood in stark contrast to his professional success. Most notable were his 4 marriages to Jody Wolcott, 1949 to 1963, Joanne Copeland, 1963 to 1972, Joanna Holland, 1972 to 1985, and finally to Alexis Moss, whom he married in 1987 and remained with until his death in 2005. These relationships, particularly the first 3 marriages, were complicated by Carson's workaholic tendencies, his difficulty with emotional intimacy, and, according to some accounts, his infidelities. His second divorce from Joanne Copeland reportedly cost him $6 million, a substantial sum in early 1970s dollars that nevertheless represented only a fraction of his growing wealth. It was his third divorce, however, that truly shocked Hollywood and the financial world. His split from Joanna Holland in 1985 resulted in what was then one of the largest divorce settlements in California history, reportedly $80 million in cash and property. This extraordinary figure represented approximately 30% of his estimated worth at the time. That settlement was a wake-up call for Johnny, noted a financial advisor familiar with celebrity estates. It made him much more conscious about wealth protection and careful estate planning. I think it fundamentally changed his approach to his finances and legacy. Carson's relationship with his 3 sons, Christopher, Corey, and Richard, from his first marriage, was similarly complex. Though he provided well for them financially, emotional connections were often strained by his demanding career and reserved nature. Johnny wasn't the most demonstrative father, admitted a family acquaintance. He loved his boys without question, but he wasn't particularly equipped to show it in conventional ways. There was a distance there that I think everyone found difficult. This emotional reserve extended beyond his immediate family to his broader relationships. Despite his affable on-screen persona and genuine kindness to many colleagues, Carson maintained few close friendships. Those who did break through his carefully constructed barriers, people like his longtime lawyer and confidant Henry Bushkin, described a man capable of great generosity, but also prone to sudden coldness if he felt betrayed or invaded. Carson's complicated relationship with alcohol further contributed to his personal challenges. Though never derailing his career in the way it had for many Hollywood stars, his drinking was well known within industry circles, occasionally contributing to difficult behavior at parties or in private settings. Johnny used alcohol as a social lubricant, explained a former Tonight Show producer. He was naturally shy, believe it or not, and a couple of drinks helped him relax in public settings. But there were times when it went beyond that, especially during difficult periods in his personal life. Perhaps the most profound personal tragedy in Carson's life came in 1991, when his son Richard died in a car accident at age 39. Those close to Carson describe him as devastated by the loss, though characteristically private in his grief. This tragedy reportedly led Carson to reevaluate aspects of his life and legacy, including his philanthropic intentions. After Rick's death, something changed in Johnny, revealed a longtime associate. He became more reflective about what truly mattered. I think it accelerated his retirement decision the following year, and it definitely influenced his thinking about what he wanted to do with his wealth. Despite these personal complexities, or perhaps because of them, Carson developed a surprisingly philosophical outlook on wealth and success as he aged. The boy from Nebraska who had achieved extraordinary fame and fortune became increasingly thoughtful about the purpose and meaning of his achievements. Money gives you freedom, but it doesn't give you everything, Carson once remarked to a close friend. I've been broke, and I've been rich. Rich is better, but rich also comes with its own set of problems that money can't solve. This evolving perspective on wealth, combined with his experiences of family tragedy and his natural Midwestern pragmatism, created the foundation for the remarkable decisions Carson would make about his fortune. Choices that would ultimately reveal more about the real Johnny Carson than 30 years of television appearances.
Drag all of these things out of you. If you're that versatile, why don't you do some of that stuff on your own show?
Well, I'll tell you why, Jack. To be honest, I'm too busy acting.
The final act, a fortune dispersed. When Johnny Carson passed away on January 23, 2005, from complications related to emphysema, the television world mourned the loss of a legend. Behind the scenes, however, financial and legal experts began the complex process of executing one of Hollywood's most interesting estate plans. Johnny was extraordinarily deliberate about his legacy, confirmed an attorney with knowledge of Carson's estate planning. This wasn't a hastily drafted will. This was a carefully constructed blueprint that had been refined over many years, reflecting his very specific intentions about what should happen to his fortune. The headline-grabbing revelation came when the principal beneficiary of Carson's estate was announced, not his family members, not his industry colleagues, but the Johnny Carson Foundation, previously a relatively low-profile charitable organization that would now be catapulted into the ranks of America's major philanthropic institutions with a reported endowment of $156 million. For those familiar with Carson's intensely private nature and his careful avoidance of political or social controversy throughout his career, the decision seemed puzzling at first. The host, who rarely let viewers glimpse his personal beliefs, was posthumously committing the bulk of his fortune to public causes. It was actually perfectly in character, explained a longtime production executive who worked with Carson for over a decade. Johnny believed in meritocracy because that's how he succeeded. He didn't come from money or connections. He made it on talent and work ethic. His foundation focuses on supporting people with potential who just need an opportunity, exactly the kind of support he would have appreciated in his early years. The Carson Foundation's focus areas indeed reflected personal values rarely discussed during his television career: education, children's services, and health programs, with particular emphasis on programs in Nebraska, where he spent his formative years, and Southern California, where he built his career and spent his retirement. What many found surprising was the Foundation's operating style: methodical, low-key, and resistant to publicity, mirroring Carson's own personality. Unlike foundations bearing the names of other celebrities that actively court media attention, the Carson Foundation has operated with remarkable discretion, focusing on impact rather than recognition. Johnny hated self-promotion disguised as charity, noted a longtime friend. He couldn't stand celebrities who used good causes primarily as image enhancement, so he constructed a foundation that would operate with the same restraint he valued personally. This approach extended to the foundation's grant-making philosophy. Rather than focusing exclusively on high-profile institutions that would generate publicity, the Carson Foundation has directed substantial support to smaller, less glamorous organizations with proven track records of direct impact: community colleges, children's health initiatives, and educational programs in underserved areas. One of the foundation's most significant contributions came in 2015, when it donated $20 million to Carson's alma mater, the University of Nebraska. The gift established the Johnny Carson Center for Emerging Media Arts, supporting precisely the kind of innovative communication program that had given Carson his own start decades earlier. What made the arrangement even more remarkable was Carson's decision regarding his three sons, Christopher, Corey, and Richard, posthumously. While all three received inheritances, the specific amounts were never publicly disclosed, leading to speculation that ranged from modest to generous, but not excessive. Johnny was adamant that his wealth shouldn't become a burden for his children, revealed a source close to the family. He subscribed to the philosophy that leaving vast fortunes to heirs often does more harm than good. He wanted his sons to forge their own paths, just as he had. This perspective was reinforced by Carson's own observations of wealthy families in Hollywood and beyond. He had witnessed firsthand how inherited wealth sometimes created dependency, entitlement, and purposelessness among heirs, outcomes he was determined to avoid for his own family. Johnny used to say that giving kids enormous wealth was like giving them a boat with no rudder, recalled a business associate. They might float for a while, but eventually they'd drift into trouble without the skills to navigate on their own. This philosophy became particularly poignant in light of family tragedy. Following Richard's death in 1991, Carson reportedly restructured aspects of his estate plan, reinforcing his commitment to charitable giving while ensuring his remaining sons and grandchildren would be comfortably provided for without receiving sums that might prove detrimental. The emotional impact of Carson's decisions extended beyond his immediate family. His widow, Alexis, whom he married in 1987, reportedly received specific bequests, including properties and personal items of sentimental value. Yet the bulk of the financial assets went to the foundation, a decision that sources say reflected mutual understanding between the couple about Carson's philanthropic intentions. Additionally, Carson made more personal bequests to individuals who had played significant roles in his life: loyal staff members, friends who had stood by him during difficult times, and colleagues from his Tonight Show years. These gifts, while never publicly detailed, reportedly reflected Carson's private appreciation for those who had contributed to his success and happiness. When the details became clear, there were tears, admitted a family associate, not of anger or disappointment, but of profound realization about what Johnny truly valued. It was an emotional moment when his family fully comprehended the legacy he wanted to leave. Perhaps most surprising was a bequest Carson made to the Animal Foundation of Las Vegas, a gift of $800,000 that reflected his lifelong love of animals, particularly big cats. This lesser-known passion had occasionally surfaced on The Tonight Show through visits from zoologist Joan Embery and others, but few realized how deeply Carson cared about wildlife conservation efforts. In typical Carson fashion, even these philanthropic decisions were made without fanfare or public announcement. The details emerged gradually, painting a picture of a man whose final wishes reflected values he had rarely articulated publicly, but had clearly contemplated deeply in private.
Johnny Carson, I'm going to bring you a safe and sane fourth tonight, because the monologue is a dud.
The unexpected legacy. Tears of realization. In the years following Johnny Carson's death, something remarkable happened. The foundation bearing his name began quietly but effectively transforming lives, funding scholarships, supporting educational initiatives, contributing to children's health programs, and establishing arts endowments. By 2022, the foundation had granted over $200 million to various causes, with minimal publicity or self-congratulation, an approach that perfectly reflected Carson's own values. For Carson's family, watching this philanthropic work unfold created a complex emotional journey. What began as a surprise learning that the bulk of his fortune would not remain within the family, evolved into something much more meaningful, the realization that they were stewards of a different kind of inheritance. It's moved them to tears on multiple occasions, revealed a longtime family friend. Not tears of regret or loss, but tears of pride and understanding. They've watched Johnny's wealth literally change lives, giving opportunities to young people with circumstances similar to Johnny's own humble beginnings in Nebraska. One particularly moving example came through the foundation's support of communication students from modest backgrounds. A program established at the University of Nebraska identifies promising students who, like young Johnny Carson, demonstrate talent but lack financial resources to develop their skills fully. Several recipients have gone on to successful careers in broadcasting, digital media, and film, creating a living legacy that extends Carson's impact into new generations. Carson's sons have occasionally participated in foundation events, witnessing firsthand the impact of their father's decision. For Christopher Carson, who has maintained the family's privacy in keeping with his father's example, these moments have been particularly moving. When Chris sees a scholarship recipient who reminds him of his dad, someone with that same Midwestern work ethic and quiet determination, it can be an overwhelming moment, explained a foundation board member. There's this recognition that Johnny found a way to keep discovering talent long after he left television. The emotional impact extends beyond the family to Carson's former colleagues and friends in the entertainment industry. Many have expressed that Carson's philanthropic legacy revealed a depth of character that even those close to him hadn't fully appreciated during his lifetime. Johnny was never comfortable with public displays of charity during his career, noted a former Tonight Show writer. He would quietly help people, but he hated making a show of it. This foundation is the perfect expression of his actual values, doing good work without needing to be the center of attention. One of the more touching dimensions of Carson's legacy has been how it has occasionally reunited the extended Tonight Show family. At certain foundation events, former staff members, writers, and performers have gathered, sometimes for the first time since Carson's retirement, creating moments of reminiscence and renewed connection that honor Carson's influence on their lives and careers. There was this beautiful moment at a scholarship presentation, recalled an attendee, when several of Johnny's former writers and producers were in the room, and one of the recipients performed a comedy routine that was so reminiscent of Carson's style, you could see these tough old television veterans with tears in their eyes, recognizing that Johnny's sensibility lives on in this new generation. For television viewers who felt they knew Carson through his nightly appearances in their homes, the revelation of his philanthropic legacy has added a new dimension to their understanding of the man behind the desk. The host who rarely let his guard down professionally turns out to have harbored deeply held convictions about giving back and creating opportunity. One particularly meaningful aspect of the Foundation's work has been its support for students and performers from Carson's hometown region. Every year, several scholarships are awarded to promising young people from Nebraska and Iowa, ensuring that Carson's roots remain honored even as his influence extends nationally. Johnny never forgot where he came from, explained a foundation director. He understood that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. His foundation tries to bridge that gap, particularly for kids from backgrounds like his own. Perhaps most powerfully, Carson's example has influenced how other entertainment figures approach their own legacies. Several major celebrities have cited Carson's foundation model as inspiration for their own estate planning, creating a multiplier effect that extends his impact far beyond the direct financial contributions. When a figure of Carson's stature makes such a clear statement with his final act, people notice, observed a wealth manager who works with numerous Hollywood clients. I've had multiple high-net-worth clients specifically reference Johnny Carson when discussing their philanthropic goals. His influence continues long after his final show. The ripple effects of Carson's decisions have continued expanding in unexpected ways. Institutions that received foundation support have themselves produced graduates who've gone on to establish their own initiatives, creating a multi-generational cascade of opportunity. Educational programs funded in Carson's native Nebraska have contributed to revitalizing communities that might otherwise have continued losing talented young people to coastal cities. For the family members who occasionally shed tears when witnessing the Foundation's work, there's a profound understanding that Johnny created something more valuable than a simple financial inheritance. He established a living legacy that continues to reflect his values and transform lives, a different kind of fortune that grows rather than diminishes with the passing years.
The resolution I made for 1989 is to let the band play more numbers on the show.
The professional persona versus the private man. One of the most fascinating aspects of Johnny Carson's legacy is how it has forced a reevaluation of the man behind the familiar television persona. The host millions thought they knew through nightly visits to their living rooms was, in many ways, a carefully constructed character, a version of Johnny Carson designed for public consumption that revealed only carefully selected facets of his true self. Johnny was the greatest actor in television, remarked a former NBC executive who knew Carson well. His most brilliant performance was playing Johnny Carson Tonight Show host for 30 years. That version of Johnny, relaxed, perpetually amused, always ready with the perfect quip, was both genuine and constructive. The real Johnny was far more complex. Carson's private personality was marked by contradictions that rarely surfaced during his television appearances. Behind the affable, seemingly confident host was a deeply private man who struggled with shyness in social settings and often preferred solitude to the company of others, a surprising reality for someone whose career centered on engaging with celebrities and audiences. The Johnny who could charm millions through the camera could also be profoundly uncomfortable at a dinner party with 8 people, explained a longtime friend. In intimate settings, he could be awkward, even withdrawn. He'd often slip away early from his own gatherings. The irony wasn't lost on him. America's greatest conversationalist sometimes struggled with actual conversation. This disconnect between public charm and private reticence created significant challenges in Carson's personal relationships. Those closest to him described a man capable of extraordinary generosity and loyalty, but also prone to extended periods of emotional distance, a pattern that contributed to the dissolution of multiple marriages and occasionally strained his relationships with friends and colleagues. Johnny compartmentalized his life to a degree that was almost clinical, noted a former producer who worked closely with Carson for years. When he was on, during the show, at rehearsals, even in production meetings, he was fully present, engaged, often brilliant. But when that switch flipped off, he could become almost unreachable. He retreated into himself in a way that was sometimes jarring to witness. Carson himself occasionally acknowledged this duality, though typically through humor rather than direct disclosure. "I can't talk without a punchline," he once quipped when asked about his difficulty with emotional expression in private settings. This reserved quality extended to Carson's philanthropic activities during his lifetime. Unlike many celebrities who publicize their charitable endeavors, Carson made most of his donations anonymously, avoiding the public recognition that might have enhanced his already stellar reputation. Johnny was suspicious of public virtue, explained a longtime associate. He believed that true character was defined by what you did when no one was watching, not what you proclaimed from a podium or press release. His charitable giving during his lifetime followed that philosophy, substantial but almost entirely unheralded. The Carson Foundation's approach mirrors this philosophy precisely, focused on impact rather than recognition, substance rather than appearance. In this way, the foundation may be the most authentic expression of Carson's true self, revealing through its actions the values and priorities he rarely articulated publicly. Perhaps the most illuminating example of the contrast between Carson's public and private selves came during his famous farewell episode in May 1992. While the broadcast Johnny maintained his characteristic poise and restraint, those present in the studio witnessed rare moments of genuine emotion as the mask of the consummate host occasionally slipped to reveal the man beneath. There were moments during commercial breaks when you could see him processing what was happening, this enormous chapter of his life closing, recalled a staff member present that night. The look in his eyes in those unguarded moments, that was the real Johnny, the one few people ever truly got to see. Carson's famous final words to his television audience, "I bid you a very heartfelt good night," were delivered with characteristic dignity and restraint. Yet those who knew him well recognized the profound emotion behind that carefully maintained composure. The private man briefly visible through the professional persona he had perfected over 3 decades. In many ways, Carson's estate decisions represent the final and perhaps most authentic statement of his true self. The private values and priorities that guided him, revealed at last through actions rather than words. The man who rarely let America see behind his professional mask ultimately showed his true face through the legacy he chose to leave behind. Beyond money, the true Carson fortune As we conclude our exploration of Johnny Carson's remarkable financial legacy, it's worth reflecting on what his choices reveal about the man behind the television persona, and what lessons we might draw from his example. Carson's journey from modest Nebraska beginnings to enormous wealth and influence represents a quintessentially American success story. Yet his decision to direct the bulk of his fortune toward creating opportunities for others suggests a man who never forgot his roots or lost perspective on what truly matters. Johnny understood something fundamental about wealth, observed a philanthropic advisor who has studied major entertainment estates. He recognized that money's greatest value isn't in its accumulation or even in the comfort it provides, but in its potential to create positive change when directed purposefully. For Carson's family, the initial surprise of his estate plan has evolved into a profound appreciation for the ongoing impact of his decisions. While they certainly receive financial inheritances, the greater gift has been participating in the Foundation's mission and witnessing how their father's success continues to create ripples of opportunity decades after his final broadcast. There's not a dry eye in the room when scholarship recipients share their stories at Foundation events, revealed a regular attendee. For the Carson family, those tears aren't about money lost. They're about understanding the full measure of Johnny's wisdom and foresight. What makes Carson's approach particularly noteworthy is how it balanced personal generosity toward family with broader philanthropic vision. Unlike some wealthy individuals who either leave everything to heirs or disinherit them entirely in favor of causes, Carson crafted a middle path, providing for his loved ones while ensuring his greatest financial impact would be directed toward creating opportunity for future generations. It's the difference between giving someone a fish and teaching them to fish, noted a Foundation board member. Johnny didn't just want to write checks. He wanted to create sustainable paths for talented people to develop their potential, just as he had the chance to develop his. Carson's legacy offers a compelling counterpoint to the often ostentatious displays of wealth that characterize much of celebrity culture. In an era of social media wealth flaunting and conspicuous consumption, the Carson model suggests an alternative approach, one that emphasizes impact over image, substance over show. This approach is particularly noteworthy given Carson's profession. As a television personality whose career depended on public approval and attention, he might have been expected to seek recognition for his philanthropy. Instead, he chose a path of deliberate anonymity, allowing his charitable work to proceed without the spotlight he so easily could have commanded. Johnny used to say that applause was addictive but ultimately empty if you haven't earned it, recalled a longtime friend. He felt the same way about praise for giving away money. Anyone with means can write a check, but creating meaningful change requires thought and care, not just dollars. That's what he wanted his foundation to represent. For younger generations who may know Carson only through historical clips or secondhand accounts, his philanthropic legacy offers an introduction to the man that even his legendary television career cannot fully provide. Through the Foundation's work, new audiences can glimpse the values and priorities of a cultural icon whose influence transcended entertainment to touch areas as diverse as education, healthcare, and community development. Perhaps most remarkably, the Carson Foundation has maintained its founder's distinctive approach despite his absence. Unlike some celebrity foundations that drift from their founder's intentions over time, Carson's continues to operate with the same restrained efficiency and focus on substantive impact that characterized his own professional approach. The foundation reflects Johnny's personality in almost every way, explained a board member. Efficient, unsentimental, focused on results rather than recognition. We constantly ask ourselves not just what Johnny would do, but why he would do it, trying to apply not just his specific wishes, but his underlying values to new challenges and opportunities. For viewers who welcomed Johnny Carson into their homes for 3 decades, this final chapter adds a meaningful dimension to their understanding of television's most enduring host. Behind the affable Midwesterner with the golf swing and the knowing smile was a man of principle who ultimately chose to transform his unprecedented success into a force for good. In a career defined by perfect timing, Johnny Carson's most impactful moment may have come after the camera stopped rolling, when he decided that his greatest legacy wouldn't be measured in rating points or even dollars, but in lives changed and opportunities created. And that's a fortune worth shedding a tear over. The Carson Effect. how one man's choices continue to resonate. As we approach the third decade since Johnny Carson bid farewell to television and nearly 20 years since his passing, something remarkable has occurred. Rather than fading from cultural memory as so many entertainment figures do, Carson's influence has evolved, transforming from the immediate impact of his broadcasting career to the more enduring legacy of his philanthropic choices. It's rare for a television personality's influence to grow after their death, noted a media historian specializing in broadcast history. Usually, the opposite occurs. Their cultural footprint gradually diminishes as new generations emerge without direct exposure to their work. But Carson represents something different. Through his foundation, his impact actually continues expanding in ways that transcend his television career. This Carson effect manifests in multiple dimensions, beginning with the direct impact of the Foundation's grants and programs. By 2023, over $250 million had been distributed to various causes, primarily focusing on education and children's services. These funds have created scholarships, supported community programs, established educational facilities, and provided crucial resources to organizations serving vulnerable populations. More subtle but equally significant has been Carson's influence on other wealthy individuals' philanthropic choices. Several prominent entertainment figures have explicitly cited Carson's example when structuring their own charitable giving and estate plans, creating a multiplier effect that extends far beyond the direct financial impact of Carson's foundation. I've had multiple clients mention Johnny Carson when discussing their legacy planning, confirmed an attorney who specializes in entertainment industry estate planning. They'll say things like, "I want to do something like Carson did, something substantive that creates real opportunity." His approach has become a kind of gold standard for celebrities who want their wealth to have meaningful impact. This influence extends to the operational style of other celebrity foundations as well. The Carson model, focused on impact rather than publicity, efficient in administration, strategically targeted in giving, has inspired others to adopt similar approaches, creating a more substantive form of celebrity philanthropy that prioritizes results over recognition. Perhaps most powerfully, Carson's philanthropic legacy has provided a framework for understanding the man behind the television persona, offering insights into his true character and values that might otherwise have remained hidden given his intensely private nature. Johnny Carson the philanthropist tells us more about who he really was than Johnny Carson the television host ever could, suggested a biographer who studied Carson's life and career. The choices he made about his legacy, the causes he prioritized, the approach he insisted upon, even the timing of his decisions, reveal a depth of character and clarity of purpose that his public persona only hinted at. This more complete understanding of Carson has resonated particularly with those who worked with him during his television years. Former staff members, writers, and production personnel have often expressed that learning about Carson's philanthropic decisions helped them make sense of the sometimes contradictory man they had known professionally. Working with Johnny could be complicated, admitted a former Tonight Show writer. He could be generous one moment, distant the next. Learning about his foundation and the thoughtfulness behind it helped many of us understand him better, recognizing that beneath that complicated exterior was someone with a clear moral compass and a genuine desire to create opportunity for others. For Carson's family, the foundation has created an evolving relationship with their father's legacy, one that continues to deepen their understanding of the man they knew intimately, yet sometimes struggled to fully comprehend. They're still getting to know Johnny through the work of his foundation, explained a family friend. Each project, each initiative reveals another facet of what mattered to him. It's been a beautiful process for them, continuing their relationship with their father through the good his fortune is doing in the world. As we look to the future, the Carson legacy seems likely to continue evolving in ways that might have surprised even Carson himself. The foundation's endowment ensures its work will continue for generations, creating a perpetual institution that will introduce Carson to audiences who never experienced his television presence firsthand. 50 years from now, there will be successful professionals who know Johnny Carson not as the king of late night, but as the man whose foundation gave them the scholarship that changed their life trajectory, observed an education administrator who works with Carson Foundation grantees. His cultural impact will have transformed completely from entertainment to opportunity creation. For a man who was notoriously difficult to know beyond his carefully constructed public persona, this evolving legacy offers the most authentic and revealing glimpse of the real Johnny Carson. Not the man behind the desk, but the human being behind the man behind the desk. And perhaps that's the most valuable inheritance of all, not just for Carson's family or the direct beneficiaries of his foundation, but for all of us who thought we knew Johnny Carson through those nightly broadcasts. Through his final choices about the fortune he accumulated, we can now understand something more essential about the man who kept us company for so many years.